Welcome to the Kent Lapp Podcast.
You have on your Instagram bio of the various things you have listed there, you have Republican listed.
Yeah.
Do you find that as a pastor, that is a challenge for people to overcome, or do you find that people are objective, and even if they may not have that political viewpoint, they realize that, hey, there's a lot of people in America, and different people have different opinions, and some are more Democratic, and some are more Republican, some are anywhere in between. And he happens to be one that is Republican, and he's my pastor, and I disagree with him, and that's just the way it is. Do you find it's more objective, or do you find it's more contentious?
I hope that it's more objective and conducive for what my real commitment is the free exchange of ideas and civil discourse. And by that, I mean, I think there's a whole lot of what I'm going to call postmodern smoothie boy dancing and bait switching switching bait and going on. I mean, what I mean by that is we don't really let people know what our convictions, what our positions are, honestly. And like in an act of vulnerability, this is where I am on this. This is my position. This is my stance. Can we engage in legitimate conversation, right? You know, over the last kind of 20 years, everything's about the dialogue, the story, the conversation, entering into the conversation, that kind of thing. And conversation is really, really difficult when we don't even have the freedom to sit down and say, this is where I am on this. This is my position. What's your position? Can we just be honest with each other? You know, Colossians chapter 3, one of the things that Paul says after he says, you know, if then you've been raised with Christ, you know, set your minds on things above where Christ is seated at the right hand of God, for, you know, your life is hid with Christ in God, etc. When Christ, too, as your life appears, you'll appear with him in glory. Then he says in the very next verse, nekrosateun in the Greek, put to death, therefore. And he lists this long list of things. And one of the things he says is, stop lying to each other. And so the reason that I say that I'm a Republican on my Instagram, and I know when I say that, that's going to probably alienate me from some people, but it's to say, yeah, my convictions politically tend to line up Republican. I'm just being honest with you. Now, can we have the conversation? I'm not saying that in the sense that I'm saying if your political convictions line up otherwise, that we can't have fellowship, we can't have friendship.
Yep.
You know, I think a lot of people would probably be very surprised at how many of my, you know, friends and frankly, a lot of my, maybe not so many of my closer friends, but a lot of my just acquaintances that we just hang out and have fun and so forth, would not agree with me politically on a pretty broad spectrum of things, but at least they know that I'm not trying to pull the wool over their eyes and make them think I'm something I'm not.
Yeah, I can really appreciate that. Was it like this? You're 54. So was it like this 30 years ago? It feels like now the only way you hang out with people is if you all have the same beliefs and you kind of all agree, which of course is preposterous because we all have different opinions and beliefs and ideas, and that's the way it should be. That's what's beautiful about society. And there should be a free exchange of ideas. Do you feel now that 30 years ago, say, that was more the case where people with different opinions and different thoughts could get together and still be friends and hash those out in a reasonable manner, and we're losing that? Or is this is just how it's always been?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. I love that question. A couple of things. Politics is always a dirty business because, as C.S. Lewis said, if you're not going to be ruled by God, you're going to be ruled by men, and men are always, right, we're always hungry and thirsty for power, and so politics can become a very, very unsavory space, right? But yeah, 30 years ago, I love that. Consider the debate. Just go in and check out the debate on YouTube between Ronald Reagan and Walter Mondale. There you have a Democrat and a Republican. They were divided across a number of issues, but there was a sense of respect, and even as they would take kind of funny jabs at each other, it was almost like at times they were trying to make each other laugh. I mean, you know, you think back to when Sam Donaldson asked Ronald Reagan, "Are you concerned about your age? Because, you know, you're going to be the oldest president." And he said, "I refuse to make age an issue in this presidential campaign. I will not exploit the youth and lack of experience of my opponent." And Walter Mondale cracks up laughing.
It's so great.
It's so great.
So great.
And so, yeah, 30 years ago, I think while politics has always been a very, very contentious thing, we've moved into kind of in this late postmodern era, I think, a cultural milieu in which division is seemingly so unavoidable. So, like you say, we only hang out and we only run around in echo chambers. We only exist in echo chambers. And so, frankly, part of me putting that I'm a Republican, I put a number of things on my Instagram bio that could probably cause people to cancel me, right? I'm a Calvinist, I'm a Presbyterian, I'm a Van Tillian in my epistemology and apologetic approach. But I put that on there not because I'm a politico, though I do read a ton of political history and political philosophy and that sort of thing. But I put that out there, hopefully, as an invitation to say, this is honestly who I am. Mm-hmm. And if I'm wrong, here's the thing. If I'm wrong on a particular political stance, you can't correct me if you don't know where I am on it.
That's right. Yep.
And so in some ways, the only way to have honest civil discourse is to have the respect necessary between parties or between individuals, between groups, where you can be honest about your positions. You can't correct me, and I'm sure I need correction. A person can't correct me if I'm somehow speaking in such a nebulous way, which is I think the hallmark of postmodernism. And this comes from Wittgenstein and Derrida, where words basically have no meaning and there's no objectivity in predication. We just kind of play around with words as though they are this nebulous thing, and it makes conversation really, really difficult. Mm-hmm. And so when conversation is difficult, man, we just spike the emotion, divide, and draw swords.
What does being a Republican or having Republican viewpoints mean? Did you already touch on it when you said the free exchange of ideas? Is there some things you would build around that? I'm not looking necessarily for a technical definition. I'm just curious how you think about why would you identify there? What are some of the values or beliefs there that you don't see elsewhere, and that's why you would identify as Republican?
Right. I think a couple of three of the main things for me are a commitment to a limited government. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not libertarian.
Okay.
And the reason that I'm not libertarian, though, I respect a number of libertarian authors. You think of guys like Thomas Sowell and a handful of others who is just brilliant, author and economist and so forth. But one of the things about, say, libertarianism is that I do believe the government has a role in the care of the downtrodden, the poor, that the government does need to speak into that. And some strains of libertarianism can become so focused on the individual that individualism becomes justified in some strains of libertarianism. So for me, being a Republican is a commitment to a limited government, but probably more than anything, compassion. Compassion. And I see in Republicanism at its best compassion expressed across a number of fronts, not the least of which is the dignifying of the individual and the enabling of the individual to better his or her circumstances. And I'll be honest with you, I think, and here's where I may get a little bit controversial, as I think about the current climate today and the legitimate cries and needs in minorities and the concerns that are there. That have been in the media in a very heightened way in the last several months. I think you can look back at the 60s with the Great Society of Lyndon Baines Johnson and some of the policies that were put in place actually in the name of caring about civil rights and concerns of minorities have actually not turned out to facilitate that. And so I think here we are now looking at some of the things that are going on in culture around us arising out of legitimate cries, needs, despair, etc. But then I think you have certain groups that come in and try to hijack the moral authority of the civil rights movement and ride on the coattails of that, and I don't think they're the same thing.
Yeah. And just to clarify, when you say Republican, are you saying you're a proponent of a Republican form of government, or you're saying you identify with the Republican Party, or is that one and the same?
For me, it's one and the same.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. So when I'm saying that, I'm saying I am a Republican in the sense that the party that started in 1860 as the anti-slavery party, I would identify with that.